Guys, welcome to the I Love CVille Show. It's Monday. Thank you kindly for joining us. My name is Jerry Miller. Pleasure to connect with you through the I Love CVille network. Dave Norris and Max Robinson in the house. We're going to talk Charlottesville, Virginia here in a matter of moments. Some of the stories from 2019 that are the most headline grabbing we'll talk about here in the program. Max, this is her third time on the show, a co-host of In My Humble Opinion on 103 Jamz, Sundays from 12 to 3 p.m. Dave Norris, also kind enough to grace us with his presence, the former mayor of Charlottesville, Virginia. Two proud evangelists and two folks that love Charlottesville and Central Virginia quite well, but also aren't hesitant to hold Charlottesville and Central Virginia accountable if it needs to be held accountable. And I think that's what we try to do with this program. Let's thank Interstate Pest and Service Companies for being a part of this show. The business started in 1969 with the first generation, Mr. Wells. He used his personal truck and sweat equity to build a family business that now is 4 generations of family strong, almost 100 employees in a Commonwealth-wide footprint. Interstate Pest and Service Companies. Also, our good friend Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. Whether it's physical therapy, sports medicine, or chiropractic care, Dr. Wagner is changing people's lives at Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. Judah, let's go to the studio cam, please, and let's welcome Max Robinson and Dave Norris to the show. Hello, guys.
Thank you.
Good
Hello.
afternoon.
It's great to have you both. Ladies first on this one.
Of course.
Max, you are your third time on the show. First 2 times you hit grand slams. September already in 2019. What story this year from Charlottesville or Central Virginia do you think is the most headline grabbing in your opinion?
Headline grabbing. You know, for me, the most important story that's gotten a lot of, coverage here is public housing. And what that looks like in terms of the type of housing that people feel like they deserve, the policing there, the relationships with the police, how the community feels in terms of the development that's happening around them, just maybe a lot of the issues that are going on within public housing. And so it's gotten some attention, rightfully so, and those things are important to me mainly because I used to work there, and so I got kind of an up close and personal perspective of what housing is like, right? And I learned my biggest lesson probably once I left housing, and that lesson was I didn't really see the people, right? I got caught up in my job. I felt like I did it really well, but the people became an apartment or a number to me. And I think that has is also happening right in the greater Charlottesville. And you're dealing with human beings who want to be seen, who certainly deserve to, and are asking for like basic human rights or human dignity or however you want to phrase that. And so that coverage for me has been really important. Hopefully it's bringing a lot of attention to it, and it's getting the attention of the right people who can really make change in that community.
Lloyd Snoke, welcome to the program. Cindy Fuel, Carol Schwab-Barnett. This is a great topic in that this is what you do from a day-to-day standpoint.
Right.
Undoubtedly more in the news cycle, I think more than ever. Certainly a byproduct of August 12th, that is a positive one, and certainly one that I think needs to be even more in the headlines, especially with over half the property zoned for single-family detached, maybe a massive zoning rewrite on the horizon. We got the comprehensive plan very much on the horizon here. Anywhere you want to go on this topic?
Well, I agree with Max. This is a huge issue, and we have this really amazing confluence right now of 3 major affordable low-income housing redevelopment efforts all coming together simultaneously. We're all sort of proceeding simultaneously in our community, in our region. All of them resident-directed, all of them working with really creative teams of design and development professionals to work with residents to make good things happen in affordable housing and low-income housing and public housing in Charlottesville. So between the public housing redevelopment initiative that I work on, that we work on with the residents of Charlottesville, we also have Friendship Court undergoing redevelopment here soon. under the leadership of the Piedmont Housing Alliance and their resident partners, and then Southwood down on Fifth Street Extended under the leadership of Habitat and their resident partners. And they're all kind of coming to the head. They've all been in the news this year. We've all been pursuing, various government approvals, funding applications. We're between Friendship Court and our public housing redevelopment between Crescent Halls and South First Street. We were approved for, probably, I don't know the exact total, but tens of millions of dollars this year of funding from the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. Southwood's going to be seeking, and I'm sure securing tens of millions of dollars of funding for that project. So there's a lot of really creative projects coming together, and I think it's going to do a lot to improve not only the quality of life for some of our lower income residents, but also just it's going to be beneficial to the community at large.
Let's take Friendship Court. And Friendship Court is one of the closest to the downtown mall. Friendship Court is going to have a massive new identity. We're going to have single-family detached homes that are higher in price tag, right next to affordable housing tied to a certain area median income. We're going to hopefully have the bars that are around Friendship Court taken away, so it's not doesn't have a stigma or a brand feel of a jail in a lot of ways, to something that's much more open and welcoming and approachable. What would you like to see from the Friendship Court redevelopment and as it moves forward in the future?
Yeah. Going back to Dave's comment, when we start to have conversations about the things that you mentioned, one of the things that jumps out to me is whether or not the residents are buying into this, because they have to. And unfortunately, we deal with some wanting it, but not wanting it, because of, maybe possibly having to be relocated or what it may mean for their family. And so the buy-in plays a part, and I don't know how often we have that type of conversation. And the other part is whether or not these projects are actually going to happen. Sometimes a lot of work is put in and then nothing ever happens. So those have been concerns of mine down through the years. What I'd like to see added to this project, I'd like to hope that better housing, that the residents there truly embody that or use that as a springboard to create a better lives for themselves. So maybe not necessarily putting the onus on someone from the outside in, but from the inside out, right? So hopefully that also, as you mentioned, gives them access to better education or the desire for better education or better jobs or, just maybe in the future, maybe even possibly moving out of low-income housing. So
you made the point on the last show that you would like to see the viewpoint with low-income housing change altogether, and that it's not a generational solution, one that's passed from generation to a generation, but instead is a springboard to something better.
Right. Yeah, I did. During my time in low-income housing, I got to see a lot of generations kind of be stuck, and I really don't want to offend anybody, because when I say that, I think of it out of genuine concern. They kind of get to housing and they get stuck and they get dependent on the system. Not everybody, but some people do. They become dependent on the system. And, I think for some people, I've had some conversations, moving out has become a fear. They just don't know if they can make it outside of it, and it's kind of become a microcosm, if you will, right? So what does life look like outside of public housing? And I think there's a certain culture that comes along with low-income housing that people can become accustomed to or feel like that's all they have or can have. And so that, but also the fact that they're paying for a home that will never belong to them. They're paying for cinder block walls and concrete floors. So when I say I'd like to see them move out, it's not because I feel like, you ought to be, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and out there making your own way. It's because you deserve more.
Talking quality
And
of life.
Why. That's right. That's right.
What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the challenge is that we haven't had sort of the next rungs of housing. We don't have the next rungs of housing for people who do have the wherewithal to move up the ladder and do have the impetus and the desire to move up the ladder. So, we have a significant number of residents of public housing who are paying pretty healthy rents every month.
What's like an ballpark of that?
Like $1,000 a month in
Wow.
rent to live in public housing because, and frankly, some of them really should be on a path to home ownership. But where are you going to find home ownership in this town other than
understand.
maybe a few habitat homes that somebody can afford? But we used to have starter homes here, and so part of the thinking around public housing redevelopment is how do we incorporate affordable home ownership as part of that redevelopment process for residents who are paying a pretty healthy rent every month that could be on a path to home ownership. How do we help them climb the ladder, build wealth, build assets, build equity? Jobs and job training are a key to this too, not only for redevelopment of public housing, but Friendship Court and Southwood is all of those three redevelopment projects. Again, we're talking eventually going to be hundreds of millions of dollars invested in these projects. That's going to create a lot of jobs. We should make sure residents of those neighborhoods are first in line and prepared and ready for those jobs, so they can get good paying jobs, and again help them climb the ladder for those that that desire a better life for themselves and their families. So. And then we also have to keep in mind there's a lot of residents of low-income housing and public housing who are elderly, who are people with disabilities, who may not be on a path to climb the ladder, and we want to make sure they have decent quality housing as well. And right now, we don't.
How do you see Friendship Court changing?
Well, Friendship Court will, as with the other projects I'm talking about, will be more dense. So there'll be more units there, and it'll be a broader mix of units. Right now, most of the households living in public housing and in Section 8 housing, like Friendship Court or in Southwood, are what we call extremely low income. We want to create, or we will be creating, a broader mix of incomes in all of these neighborhoods, better services, better amenities, better access to jobs and training and home ownership, all these things. And I think, it's going to really do a lot to improve the quality of life for the folks who are there, provide opportunities for them to improve their lives. Max mentioned education, so Friendship Court is going to have an early childhood education center on site, which is really exciting, and so we're looking at doing something similar perhaps with one or more of our properties. Economic empowerment is a real strong focus for all these projects. How do we help residents develop better financial literacy? How do we help them set up a savings account, build assets? All these things are coming together, and it's really exciting.
If I may
Please.
add, the other thing that I'd like to see this type of project do to Friendship Court or low-income housing is what isn't tangible, and that's the stigma attached to the area. So hopefully we can help separate that.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the obvious. If I have to put it into words, I mean, low-income housing, public housing, what have you, is looked at a certain way, and it's especially looked at a certain way right here in Charlottesville. And so, by separating themselves from, black people live here, or it's drug users or alcohol users or poor parents or uneducated or what have you. Like, I'm hoping that by revitalizing this neighborhood, that revitalization takes place kind of abroad, right? Is also mental,
What
Well,
does that?
can I just say there's also a tangible aspect of this. People who are applying for jobs who live over at West Haven, for instance, are often advised don't put your West Haven address on your application because there's a stigma attached to people who live in low-income housing, and that's a shame because there's some hardworking, there's a lot of really hardworking, responsible, folks over at West Haven.
Human beings.
And so. Just because you happen to live somewhere shouldn't dictate your path in life, your opportunity, your access to good jobs and et cetera. So I remember this sort of story about when the Queen of England came to visit Charlottesville about 40 years ago. They took her on a little motorcade around town. They deliberately routed her motorcade to go around a Hardy Drive in West Haven so that she wouldn't see our public housing neighborhood. You know, they wanted to show off the nice parts of Charlottesville. So there is a stigma attached. Max is exactly right. And through this redevelopment process, these are going to. I mean, the housing is going to be much better, but I think the communities are going to be much healthier, and I think it's going to be a really positive thing for all involved. As Max said, though, the residents have to buy into this, and so this isn't something that we can do from in a top-down manner. It has to be something we do working with the residents. So we are meeting with residents of each of our neighborhoods to envision a new future for their community. You know, and then our job is to help them achieve that vision.
Do we feel the residents are truly empowered in this process? Or is it, for lack of a better phrase, like window dressing?
You know, sometimes I feel like it's done as a courtesy. It's done as a photo op, if you will. And I don't feel like they're always heard or understood. And a lot of that is people being in the room that can, you know. So when we talk about responsibility, you know, a lot of people that look like me need to be in that room to help, you know, push our population forward. But, you know, I think if done in the right way, then yes, it can be beneficial. But, you know, the residents have to be willing to have that type of conversation and genuinely want the change that's being discussed. And the people that are listening have to be able to relate to what's being said and be able to implement that change.
What do you think a healthy housing system looks like in Charlottesville? Affordable housing is an aspect of an overall healthy housing system. What is healthy from a housing standpoint in Charlottesville? Throw it to Max and then throw it to you, Dave. What do you think?
Healthy housing is thriving housing, like any other neighborhood where we're not concerned about how much someone makes or whether or not, you know, they're eating at night. Like it's thriving. So, you know, we have a good place to live, a nice place to live, and we have access to education, the same that all others are receiving, and we have access to food, and we don't have to worry about some of the things that can affect neighborhoods like drugs and alcohol. Those type of things make a good neighborhood.
What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to sort of speculate about what it would look like because we've actually heard from our residents about what what a positive vision for housing looks like. And so the FAR, which is our citywide public housing resident organization, came forward a couple years ago with a document called the Positive Vision for Public Housing. And they talk about all the things that Max just mentioned, but also things that like access to green space and quality play space for kids and access to jobs and transportation and services. And they understand it's going to need to be a little bit more dense for a variety of reasons, but they don't want to live in giant warehouses or high rises, you know. And so they laid out a vision of what a positive, redevelopment process looks like and what healthy communities look like. And it's we're doing our best to work with them to achieve that vision.
We have trepidation with the added density in such a small
Absolutely.
town with infrastructure that's not ready for that density.
Well, I think writ large, that's absolutely true. When you talk about places like Pantops is a perfect example where we're constantly adding more density, more development, and yet the road infrastructure can't even handle the density that's there now, right? So that's a sort of a big picture problem. But even on a neighborhood by neighborhood level, whenever you talk about increasing density, increasing number of units, people get concerned, because it means more traffic, more parking, more people. It's less, you have less of your own personal space maybe. And so it's a balance. I think our residents understand that, we have a huge need for additional affordable housing, and so the Housing Authority is doing our part. We can't solve the problem on our own, but we're going to do our part to help increase the stock of affordable housing at a variety of income ranges, but also we've got to create housing types that don't keep the Housing Authority 100% dependent on the public housing subsidy we get from the federal government every year, which is not a reliable subsidy. It's been declining over the years, and we need to create additional revenue sources for the Housing Authority so that we can cover the costs of providing for our residents and providing decent housing. So there's a variety of reasons why higher density makes sense. but you can't overdo it. You can't crowd too many people in one spot. Just won't work.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to add to that. The other aspect when you talk about what a good low income neighborhood community looks like. Is also relates to the family dynamic itself. So being able to restore our families. Oftentimes, when one of the parents gets in trouble, they're not allowed to live on that property anymore. And so you got a lot of people, unfortunately, breaking their lease agreements and things like that. And then we all know what type of effects a broken home can have on the adults and on the children and things like that. So I think that also plays a part.
You're getting props from Aaron Simmons. He says you're doing a
yeah.
hell of a job
Yeah.
here. Jennifer McLaughlin watching the program. Dave McNair watching. The Daily Progress is tuned in today. Tyler Berry from Catch the Chef. James Watson. Amy Benson is watching from Moose's by the Creek. Keeley Kitchens. I think we are in I'm going to throw this in general to Dave here.
Okay.
I think we're in an interesting spot because we have 3 city council spots up for grabs. And we're at arguably one of the most important elections in Charlottesville history. At a time where there's a lot of crossroads, not just affordable housing, but other elements as well. The West Main streetscape, millions and millions of dollars. Comprehensive plan. Are we in a couple years where we're going to have a massive zoning change to the entire city, which I think we very well could be? How ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units, are seen, I think is going to be approached and welcomed and encouraged to help solve this housing problem. I mean, we're at and I want to get your biggest story so far, but dot the I's and cross the T's on this here with 3 open spots on council.
Yeah, I really appreciated your show the other day with the 3 Democratic candidates, and I believe Bellamy Brown will be on your show.
He's coming on the 16th.
16th, next Monday.
Yeah,
so,
next Monday. And he's watching now.
You've got 4 really strong candidates right there, and I think as we've discussed previously, the odds have to favor the Democratic candidates. However, as I've said on several occasions, if anybody can pull off an upset this year, I think it would be Bellamy Brown, and so it's going to be a low turnout election. It's an off year election. There's not a lot happening higher up the ballot that's going to draw a lot of voters to the polls, and so it really is going to come down to whose base of voters is more energized. And but yeah, you're right. There's a lot of issues coming to the fore. This next council is going to have a lot on its plate. You're going to be very busy next year with onboarding 3 new councilors and getting them up to speed and getting their arms around all these issues. And I would add to the list we have Max touched on it earlier, issues of police-community relations. That's an ongoing issue. I think just the broader conversation around racial equity in Charlottesville continues to be a priority. I know Michael Payne, if and when he gets elected, is going to really focus more energy on sort of environmental and climate change type of issues. So it's there's going to be a lot for this next council to grapple with, and I wish them well.
Do you, and this is just, you have your finger on the pulse of the community. Do you feel like the community at large, and this is not about anybody specifically on council, but the community at large, do we understand from your pulse, your finger on the pulse, does the community understand the importance of what's coming up here in November? I mean, 3 spots is a lot of spots.
Yeah, I think that the community understands the importance. The problem is that everybody also understands what's important to them, right? So, you have people that want things done to the streetscape, the community at large, the environment, the social issues, the this, the that. So I think they certainly understand that it's important, but where we differentiate is who we want there based on how they can benefit me. And I think that the trick with any council member that gets up there, and in my humble opinion, to be a good member is to see everyone. And understand the needs of everybody, and I'm sure it's definitely an art form to be able to kind of to hold your office, and to run your office in a sense that you are able to understand everyone's needs and can work in effect to help everyone. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Neil Williamson, welcome to the program. Last one on this topic. Do you think that the mood or the environment in council during council meetings should change?
Well, it should change. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly a lot better than it was 2 years ago when council meetings were being shut down and people were being dragged out in handcuffs, and it was very tumultuous, and understandably so. We went through a very traumatic time as a community, traumatic experience, and so I think it's better now. I think I've said this many times. I'm a big fan of our current mayor, and I think she is doing a good job to bring some issues to the fore that have been neglected for far too long. And but I think the real question is going to be, first of all, who gets elected in November, and how that's going to change the dynamic, and who is it going to, what issues are they going to bring forward? Who are they going to bring into and invite into and attract into those council chambers, and see how that dynamic plays out. So.
Peggy Walton Sprouse is giving you some props. Thank you, Dave, for always doing an excellent job. Walter Hinkie says, thanks, Dave. He's watching now. Neil Williamson is watching from the Free Enterprise Forum. Max, you're getting props on your feed from Leontini Clay Peck, from Edna Hackney, from Aaron Simmons. Dave, we are 30 minutes in. You guys have made this easy. I'm curious of what you thought is the story of the year.
I'm
so
surprised
far
nobody's
at this point.
mentioned UVA basketball yet, Jerry.
Is that where you're going to go? UVA
I'm not
basketball?
even a sports guy, but if you had to ask me, what is literally the most headline-grabbing Charlottesville story of the year, I'd have to say UVA. But I know, I believe it or not, I was actually going to say this issue of housing redevelopment as with these three major projects all coming forward simultaneously. It may not always grab the most headlines, but in terms of what's important to our community and to our residents, I find it hard to find something that's that gripping, if you will.
Well, I'm concerned, as I've mentioned this to you before, I'm concerned as a young dad and that Charlottesville is heading down the road. I mean, and I'm not knocking the guy at all. Joffrey Woodruff is allocating $125 million to a data science school at UVA. He's literally building a school from scratch thanks to his checkbook. He then is taking over the Charlottesville Ice Park, and he's redeveloping the ice park into the Center of Developing Entrepreneurs, CODE, which is going to be a home for his portfolio of businesses, and it's going to attract a number of new employees that are making strong wage. I think it was 70% of folks that work for the city of Charlottesville cannot afford to live in the city of Charlottesville. And I honestly, and I say this all the time here, and I've caught a lot of flack from this, but I think it's important to have this conversation. I'm very trepid that Charlottesville is going to turn into this community of one percenters that are just using it as kind of like their playground, whether it's, I'm worried about that. I'm worried about that as a dad. I'm worried about that as someone who's going to be spending the rest of his life here. And I want the community to be as eclectic and as diverse and as well-rounded as possible for my son. And I'm trepid that that's not where we're going right now, Dave.
Yeah, and I think that's, not to beat a dead horse here, but I think that's why these housing initiatives are so important, is because the one thing that I don't know that I clarified enough about those three projects, none of them are going to displace any residents, right? So not only are we replacing one for one the affordable units that are being renovated or rebuilt, but we're adding additional affordable units, in part because you're exactly right, Jerry. The overall trend in this community is gentrification, is attracting a lot more high-wage residents and high-wage jobs. There are benefits to that. There are absolute drawbacks to that in terms of making it too expensive for working class families to stay here and for retirees to stay here. So there definitely is a real risk of even more people being pushed out of Charlottesville than already have been. I mean, we've been seeing it for several years now, quite a few years now. And, I think about my own neighborhood over in the Woolen Mills. The speculation has already started. I mean, the real estate speculation is really going to go through the roof over there because Willow Tree Apps and the new redevelopment at the end of Market Street with the old Woolen Mills, it's going to be a beautiful development. attract a lot of jobs and economic activity. But a lot of the people that work there are going to want to live right in the neighborhood around there, and they make a very high wage, relatively speaking, and so they're going to be buying up real estate all around Woodland Mills, similar to what we've seen in other parts of the community, in Belmont and other parts of Charlottesville. So it's a real threat. You're absolutely right.
What do you think, Max?
Yeah, if Charlottesville is in fact on the track that you're talking about, then again, that's important. Why it's important to have the right people in the rooms when decisions are being made to kind of head this off. Right? It's important that whoever's in those rooms can be able to understand the community as a whole and work in the benefit of the community as a whole instead of small factions of the community. The other part of that, I would say, is that minorities, African Americans, low income people need to pay attention, right? So let's say if we are headed in the direction you discussed, then those that are making the decisions, the powers that be, should bring us along, right? If that makes sense to you, should make room for us. That doesn't always happen like that. So on the other side of that is that we have to be paying attention. We have to make sure that we get our kids educated. We have to make sure that we are doing the things that we can control in order to kind of solidify a place in this new Charlottesville that you're talking about.
That's why I think we gave some props, especially the last time, to someone like Yolanda Harrell with the New Hill Development Corporation. And their model has pivoted some since the redevelopment of Star Hill. Now more about creating an educational infrastructure where this infrastructure can educate the folks that patronize their program on building wealth.
Okay.
Not just like taking $1, turning it into $2, but creating family type, generational type of wealth. I thought you did a really good job the last time of kind of highlighting how New Hill Development Corporation is also building some good within the community as well.
Yeah. So I don't know much about that project, but I know the individuals that are responsible for that project, and I understand their heart and their thought process in this, and they certainly want to see their community thrive. They hold multiple forums. They are out in the community talking to people. They have the right people at the table, and they really want to make Charlottesville a better place for the Black and minority people, right? And so I trust their vision, and I think that they're playing their role in order to make CVille a better place for Blacks.
Neil Williamson says, guys, is there a community in the United States that is in fact getting the gentrification challenge right?
Yeah, that's a great question. Neil's a smart guy. Maybe you can research that and get back to us.
Yeah, that's up your alley, Neil. I mean, it's such a difficult challenge because it's like if you just let the free market work itself out, then it's going to cause gentrification amplified. And it's going to just drive this capitalistic mindset that we have as a society. Let's do what's best for us. And what's best for us is not what's best for the community totality. So,
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think?
Well, and at the end of the day, you'd rather be a community that people are investing in than a community are disinvesting in, right? And so it's a delicate balance, but if you have so much investment happening that it's driving out all the people that can't keep up, that are on limited incomes or on lower incomes, that's not healthy for a community either. So, some of the models that Michael Payne has talked about in terms of like
the land
trusts, and
Yeah.
which is a vehicle that has worked in some cities to keep speculative costs down and allow working class families to stay. I think that's a good model. I think some of the housing initiatives that we've been talking about are good approaches, but overall, we're seeing it left and right. We've talked about Belmont Apartments on this show. We've talked other initiatives other projects where we're losing affordable housing stock to these market pressures. And then whenever you talk about adding new affordable housing, there's all kinds of pressures. And so it's
How did you manage it when you were mayor? How do you manage the wants of, say, business and developers with the needs with our most impoverished citizens?
Yeah, so I think at that time, we were looking at, there were certain parts of the city which actually were sort of crying out for more investment. We had entire blocks, abandoned blocks on West Main Street, for instance, which were kind of not doing very well, and so we were looking for development in some of our commercial areas where you could sustain a little bit more density, you could sustain more economic activity, but also mindful of pressure on some of our residential neighborhoods, and not wanting to encroach there and negatively impact the quality of life in some of our residential neighborhoods. There's always this tension about UVA in Charlottesville and sort of what level of growth by the university is helpful and which level is detrimental. So it's just a constant balancing act, and sometimes you get it right and sometimes you don't.
I'll throw this to you guys. I was taking an Uber on Saturday from my home right on the Albemarle County, Charlottesville line to my buddy's place, and he lives on Knoll Street. And I was talking with the Uber driver, and he was raised in the 10th and Page neighborhood in the early to mid 90s. And he said 10th and Page in the early to mid 90s, his name was Clarence. Asked me not to use his last name. And he said 10th and Page in the early and mid 90s was one of the most unsafe areas of the Commonwealth. It was torn with the crack epidemic. People were robbing, stealing, killing, and do whatever they could to survive. And this created a culture that permeated generations to come. And he goes, I look at 10th and Page now, and he says, I see 10th and Page as being completely different than what it was, say, 25 years ago. It's certainly safer. You can walk there at night. But then you think about the folks that made up the neighborhood in the early and mid 90s when I was there, and they're not there anymore. And he says he also has trepidation with like the new Dairy Market and Dairy Central development that's coming there, that are going to bring 19 restaurants, that are going to bring a tap room from Star Hill and some high dollar apartments and condos. And he feels that's further going to gentrify the neighborhood. And it's like, what do the folks from the 10th and Page West Haven neighborhood need with $25 a ticket restaurants for one person? It's like, that's not going to work for us.
Right.
And he feels like it's just further clearance that it's going to change the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes when those type of neighborhoods get revitalized and they get rid of all the bad, they get rid of everything, right? They get rid of the people too. It's an afterthought, if it's a thought at all, to bring the people that this community in essence belong to back there. And I don't know. I don't know the balancing act with that, right? It's riddled with drugs or alcohol or whatever the problem is, right? And then you can't seem to take those things out without taking the black people out of that neighborhood too, which doesn't, make sense to me. And so, yeah, it's certainly something that we have to figure out. Yeah.
Well, and that was a deliberate choice. This wasn't some sort of invisible hand of the marketplace. That 10th and Page redevelopment project was deliberately structured to gentrify that neighborhood. And they had a choice between two approaches, and I know that because I was involved in arguing for one of those two approaches.
Because you're saying tax credits were given to folks who moved to the neighborhood.
No, I'm just saying, like, they had a choice between working with the existing residents of the neighborhood, the renters in the neighborhood, help them climb the ladder and become homeowners in this new redevelopment project, or kind of importing wealthier home buyers in to buy houses that were being renovated. The first option, which I was arguing for, would have taken more time and it would have been a little bit more expensive, but in the long run would have avoided this across-the-board gentrification that we've seen in 10th and Page. But they instead, for the most part, went with the other option, which when they bought these older, sometimes abandoned, sometimes run-down houses and renovated and fixed them up, instead of selling them to people who had lived in the neighborhood, they brought in people from outside, many of whom were affiliated with UVA, and it has changed the quality of the neighborhood. And, and again, some people would say there are good aspects to that. You don't have the open-air drug markets that we used to have. You don't have the level of violence and shootings that we used to have. But I think that would have also been the outcome had you gone with the other approach, and we would have done a lot more to help build wealth in our historically African American neighborhood, and allowed people to stay there and raise their families there, and instead we've just continued on this path of displacing people.
You know, and then let's be honest here, like a lot of the families, the black families that this was happening to, right? It's not, it may have been grandmother that owned the home or mom that owned the home, but it's kids and grandkids that are selling the drugs or whatever, whatever was happening out there. And so you're absolutely right. Rather than get rid of the problem, they got rid of everyone altogether.
Right. Right.
Walter Hinnicky is saying, I did not know Max. I'm loving her perspective and hearing her voice on this program. Chuck Shelton, exactly. We need more standard affordable housing and not high occupancy substandard tenants like we had in Vinegar Hill in the 70s. He's basically saying we need to add more quality to affordable housing to build kind of a generational funnel that we can help folks up the ladder. Let me throw this to you here, and I'll give it a like and a share on any of the streams that you're watching. I think what's happening is you have, say, like, I'm seeing this in Fifeville a little bit now. We certainly see this in Tended Page, is people that have, that are cash rich, that are developers in the real estate game. They're going to some of the residents where some of the homes are not as quality, as well kept as they should be, and saying, here's some money.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to buy this house, and then they pump more into the back end, flip it, and make money.
Yeah, that's an old trick.
Throw that. How do you say no though to the upfront short-term money when you need the money to get out of it?
Right. That is a tough one because of the lifestyle and the situations that African Americans oftentimes find themselves in, right? They're poverty stricken. And so that short money looks a whole lot more appealing than standing here and struggling with taxes or, being able to, keep the home warm and things like that. But it comes down to mindset, I think. I suppose in some cases it's best to just cut your losses, take the money and go. But on the other hand, it comes down to mindset. And that's, in situations like that, it can be something that African Americans lack, right? We don't understand the wealth of owning your own home and, things like that. So, yeah, I think that it comes down to mindset.
What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I agree. And the other part of this is that a lot of folks who are living in older housing, it's very very expensive to stay in the homes because they're poorly insulated. They're not energy efficient. Their utility bills are through the roof. It's crazy how much money people are paying on utility bills unnecessarily. And so when I was on council and other councils before and after me, we increased investment in programs like AHIP, where they went in and actually would help fix up some of these older homes, so that tenants that the residents, the owners of those homes, could afford to stay there and not be priced out. And in addition, we put in some tax relief initiatives, which this current council, under the leadership of Mayor Walker, has significantly expanded to bring down the property tax burden. Because when you're on fixed income, and all the homes around you are gentrifying, all the neighborhood around you is gentrifying, your property value is going through the roof, but so are your property taxes, right? And so it's really hard to stay in that home. Between utility bills and property taxes, people are being priced out. And so between the programs like AHIP and the tax relief, we're able to do more. It's not enough, but we're able to do at least a little more to keep people in their homes.
We're getting a lot of questions coming in, a lot of comments. James Watson, one of the commenters, possibly we need to look at new businesses where folks are encouraged to hire within the neighborhoods and within the community, helping young people develop a business and entrepreneurial mindset, and then encouraging the young people to stay within the neighborhood and the community to continue having a positive impact. Another comment coming in, this is coming in from Gwendolyn Gail Cassidy. She's saying, when is the city going to look at homelessness, the housing models that Austin and Detroit have implemented successfully? We have this coming in from Tim. When is the city going to look at the homeless problem that we have on the downtown mall? This is a topic we get all the time. And this is a topic where it's tough. People don't like to talk about death and sex and money and race and topics like this. We talk about them freely on this program. And folks often are saying on this show that we need to take the soup kitchens and the havens and position them in a place that is not by the downtown mall, because that will then encourage the homeless population not to aggregate or hang out downtown. I don't agree with it either. Many in the DBAC are huge proponents, the Downtown Business Owners Association, of moving the, lack of a better phrase, soup kitchen away from downtown to see if that'll potentially solve the homeless population. This is going to hit close for you here. Why don't we start with you on this topic?
Well, the reality is that wherever there are job services, population centers, that's where people congregate, whether you're homeless or you're making six figures, and so people said this, when we were starting the Haven, and that, it's just going to draw homeless people downtown. Well, guess what? Homeless people were already downtown. They were hanging out in the library. And that's not a day shelter. It's not an appropriate place for homeless people to spend their days. And that's one of the main reasons why we created the Haven, was to give them a more appropriate place and a place with better resources, better services, and it's working. And it's getting people, connecting people with housing opportunities so they can get off the streets. That's ultimately the goal of addressing homelessness. It's not necessarily providing, more shelter beds or more soup kitchens and more programs, although some of those are important, but it's getting people out of homelessness, and we know how to do that. When we built the first crossings at 4th and Preston, the first single-room occupancy permanent supportive housing facility in the city, in the region, it cut the number of chronically homeless individuals in Charlottesville in half. We know, thanks to the Haven and Potcham and other organizations, how many homeless individuals we have in our community, what it would take to get them off the streets and into housing. If we did one more facility like the Crossings, we could virtually eliminate chronic homelessness in Charlottesville. So these are all doable things, and the answer isn't to just shove them into some other part of our community and pretend that we've solved the problem. The answer is to solve the problem.
Walter says another Crossings would help solve homelessness, what you just said right there.
Yep.
Max, what do you think?
Yeah. These are human beings, right? These are people, and this is part of the reason why our society and even Charlottesville is the way it is that when things don't fit the way that you want them to fit, or when they don't affect you in an optimal way, then we want to get rid of it, or we want to ostracize, or we push it over in a corner, right? And so, it blows my mind that people would say to take the homeless and move their resources or what have you further away from me, so I don't have to look at them.
Further away from public transportation, from parks, from library.
So, but it never occurred to you to talk about how we can get rid of homelessness altogether. I see these people every day. I walk past them. I hear their conversations. Last week maybe they were talking about the stock market. They're home. They're homeless. They were talking about the stock market. They're human beings, right? And they just need the city and the people that can make some change here, and powers that be need to come together and figure out how to help these people versus pushing them away, right? It's part of why we are the way we are here in Charlottesville and the condition that we're in.
Roy Sorsenberg, Planning Commissioner, is watching the program right now. Todd Fiskin, Leanne Wiley, thank you for joining us. Chris Turner and Crozet is watching. Mary Maple says, hi, Dave.
Hi, Mary.
Your page is blowing up here. How do you make the downtown mall better then? Downtown mall has a long way to go. It pains me to say that, because we're downtown, we're I Love CVille, it's the heartbeat of Charlottesville. Downtown mall has a long way to go.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there's a lot of different issues, as you say. I think in terms of African Americans or minorities, you make room for what you desire, right? And so if people want their shops to be frequented by people that look like from me, then you make room for that. If you want them at your concerts, you make room for that. If they're welcome, then they know that, right? So it's mindset. People got to care. Right? We're too concerned with what benefits me and what gets me to the top and keeps me on top of the totem pole, versus the concerns and how we can help those that are around us.
What do you think?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, I think if you're really committed to diversity, you can't just pay it lip service. You just have.
Is it the city that has to do it then?
I think we all have to do it.
Yeah.
And But it's oftentimes it's little things, like for instance, removing the benches from the downtown mall. That was one approach that was used to, again, to kind of move the homeless along. Was we don't want them to be too comfortable, so we don't want to have too many places they can sit on the mall.
Joan Fenn's a huge one with this.
That was a really bad decision, and I regret that the city agreed to that. Because it makes the downtown mall less hospitable, less welcoming for people of all ages and abilities, and we want to create a downtown mall that's welcoming, that's inviting. And if you come downtown and the only places you can sit and relax on the mall or in some of these high-priced cafes, well, again, you're going to get what you plan for. So.
Would you have closed 4th Street?
I argued against opening 4th Street in the first place.
Before it became a street?
Yeah. Because of the same issues that we heard about recently with pedestrian safety. So I think thankfully there haven't been the kind of life-threatening incidents in terms of everyday pedestrian use. Obviously, we had a horrific incident on August 12th, but in terms of everyday use, we haven't had that. I think there were some good arguments made for how it helps with traffic flow downtown and accessibility downtown for people with limited mobility. So I don't know. I mean, in general, I like to keep pedestrian spaces for pedestrians, but I think it's probably fine to keep.
I'll just share a real quick personal story with you. I went out on the downtown mall once to have lunch. I was dressed in work clothes, had my name badge on, went to go spend my money in a business for lunch, and while there was trying to help someone else who had a kid, and I could relate because I'm a mother, and I was shooed away, I'm standing here trying to help. I was shooed away by the shop owner like I was a net or something like that, and it's like, no matter, it was one of those, punches in the gut, one of those rude awakenings, like no matter how well I'm dressed, no matter how well I speak to you, no matter, I'm spending my money with you, I still am what I am to you.
Did you say anything?
I didn't. Yeah. I didn't leave. I refused to leave because the mom needed help. So I stayed and I, did what I offered to do, and then I left.
Would you have closed 4th Street?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not certain whether or not I would or wouldn't. Yeah.
It's an interesting topic. I'm curious to see what happens. Peggy says, thank you, Max, Jerry, and Dave, for a great show. Bless you all for loving Charlottesville and having these conversations. I mean, I'm just going to throw it. Why don't we end on this? We're 57 minutes in. You want to add something to it?
I do. I want to totally change the subject,
Yeah.
but if you want to
Please.
wrap up,
No,
and then
please.
because this is out of left field,
Yeah.
but I want to put in a quick plug if I can.
Sure, yeah.
And one of the other hats I wear is I'm executive director of the Charlottesville Winneba Foundation. So we support exchanges between Charlottesville and our sister city in Ghana in West Africa. And so we every couple of years we bring groups of Charlottesville residents over the ocean to go visit Ghana and see our sister city and experience the culture and history of Ghana. So we have 2 trips that we're planning for 2020. They're coming up quick, and so we have a general information session next Monday, the 16th, at 7 p.m. at Gordon Avenue Library. If anybody wants to hear about these trips and learn what these trips entail and what it takes to get on, to join one of these trips, we'd love to have you. Again, Monday the 16th, 7 p.m., Gordon Avenue Library, Charlottesville, Winneba.
Throw these 2 comments out and then give it back to you guys for a final word. Jada Howard, Max, I know how you feeling. I've been in that same situation downtown myself. Michelle Wilson Morris, I'm watching from Washington, D.C. metro area. Conversation at work last week. Max, wow, I just love your delivery and perspective on a very tangled, emotional topic. Thank you as well, Dave and Jerry. We're going to archive the show in totality on ilovecville.com. We're now turning the show into an iTunes podcast that you can listen to on iTunes. We will then syndicate the show for 30 days following today on 17 Facebook pages, 17 Twitter accounts, the 3rd largest Instagram community in Charlottesville, and an e-newsletter that reaches 108,000 inboxes every morning. I throw this to you. What you're saying is resonating with everybody. I am a little nervous, and I'm a positive person, right? It's tough for me not to see things people say through rose-colored glasses or positive Pete mentality. Because I'm positive. You know, I feel like a positive mindset breeds positive action. But I'm nervous of what's in store for Charlottesville. I'm nervous because this election is much more important than I think our community is giving it credit for. It scares the hell out of me that it's going to be such a low turnout election. And you're exactly right. And it's an extremely important one. I'm nervous because I'm seeing Charlottesville turning into a community, I'll cut to the chase, of rich white people. Okay? I'm nervous that 42% of African Americans don't feel welcome in the downtown mall. And the whole point of the downtown mall, in its like essence, is to have this like heartbeat, approachable melting pot of Charlottesville. I'm nervous of how downtown is spreading south, down to Ix and down to Avon Extended. And I hope it's done correctly in the right way that really continues to be true to the people that live in the neighborhoods there. I'm nervous for, you know, my friends that live in neighborhoods that are about to be gentrified big time. Like my friend Damian Banks with the BCBA, and he's doing his organization and his basketball league and his sports leagues at Tonsler, and they rely on parking up and down Cherry and in Kim's Market for folks to be able to enjoy the league, and I don't think that's going to be the case for much longer because of how it's going to gentrify. I'm just nervous, Max, of what's coming down the pipe.
You know, while you and I and Dave may be nervous about it, there's a lot of people out there that are thrilled about the direction that it's headed in. And I think that the way to can combat that is just the good has to outweigh the bad. You know, you asked me, I think the first show I was here, and we were talking about racism when we were talking about the statue, and I told you moving the statue didn't matter to me because what did it do to racism, right? And you said, how do we get rid of that? I said, I don't know because it's a heart condition, but that wasn't entirely true, right? But I was just afraid to say, just because of the stigma attached to women and showing their emotions, that I feel like the way that we get through this and past this is we showed the opposite of what racism or whatever issues that Charlottesville is facing right now is. But how do we cure that? And I'd say the answer is love, honestly, right? And that's not a sexy answer because people want to be able to fix Charlottesville behind a degree, or they feel like the answer is found in a book. But quite frankly, you, me, Dave, the people in this room now are walking around with the answer, right? So we do our parts, we give what we can, the good has to outweigh the bad, and I think Charlottesville can move past this, right? And we can get to we can stop some of the things that you foresee coming and just really create a city that belongs to everyone, because I think what we can all rally behind is that we all love Charlottesville, right? So what does that look like? How do we get it there? Those are the questions that have to be asked, and the right people have to contribute.
You got to follow that up.
There's no way to follow
How do you follow that up, Max?
I think that we just leave it right there, honestly.
You guys crushed it. Walt, Max, you are on point right now. He wants to see you get involved in policy and politics.
Oh, gosh. Probably the least political person that you know.
And you don't have any free time either, do you?
No, I just believe in right and wrong, and I believe in looking out for people, as we all should.
We'll take the show, guys, and put it on ilovecville.com today. People are asking where they can watch it. You can watch it there. You can listen to it on iTunes, and then we'll syndicate it across our network. We close the program by asking everybody to please embody the golden rule. We don't make it about religion. We just make it about treating other people in the community how you want to be treated yourself. Charlottesville needs it more than ever. The Commonwealth and the country need it more than ever. It's the golden rule. Dave Norris always crushes it. Max Robinson always crushes it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Seriously, it was awesome. You guys have a good afternoon. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jerry, always a pleasure.
Do okay?
Easy. Flew by. One more